We all know about the fight, flight, freeze. One of the ways that that works is that we have some internal system that's always trying to protect us from harm and it's always trying to help us feel safer. And one of the ways that that works is we go into freeze. So if we can't reasonably run away from a problem and we can't fight our way through it, then our system will bring in the next mechanism, which is freeze. And the way that works emotionally is that when we're feeling anything that's too intense, we'll find a way to get away from that. So it could be, partly we're talking about dissociation, where we just kind of mentally leave. And also, it could show up as, we start to get close to something and things get kind of foggy, or we notice that we're off on another train of thought. Compulsive thinking is also part of the way we defend ourselves against feeling scared. We move into problem solving mode. So today we're going to do a relaxation, but we're also going to look at what our system does to protect us when we're feeling overwhelmed or sad or powerless, shamed, all of those experiences. What happens in our system and how do we protect ourselves from feeling like that? So let's take a moment to let all of those words kind of settle a little bit. One thing about our primitive nervous system is that it's always on duty. It's always ready to jump into action to protect us. And it's not very sophisticated. A lot of the time, we have reactions that are based on when we had a much lower window of tolerance, a much smaller window of tolerance. When we're children, it's very important that we're attuned to, that we're not ignored. Lots of times we're experiencing higher levels of threat. We're abused in some way, or maybe we're bullied. And as children, we really want to protect ourselves from this, and we don't have very many options. So one of the options that we always have is to go into freeze. We might not have the resources to fight back. We might be too small. We might not have any money. We might not have the social resources. Our system always has that opportunity to go away and to protect ourselves from whatever's happening by kind of ignoring it almost inside. So that's a form of emotional freeze that I'm sure we all know. And on a longer term basis, we can avoid our feelings through all kinds of addictions. That's very common. We get really busy. There might be, what we might recognize as an addiction, like some kind of drug or social media, screen addictions. There's all kinds of ways that we do this, but at the very root of it is this system that we have to try to keep ourselves from feeling pain. So let's just settle into the body for a moment. Notice what your body feels like right now. And let yourself be supported and relaxed. So if you're sitting comfortably, if you need a blanket or something, get that. And notice your breath. One of the ways that we protect ourselves is that we hold our breath. It's another strategy of the body that if we're not breathing very much or if we're holding our breath, we won't be noticed. It's a way of protecting ourselves from outside threat. And that can become quite a habit in our body as well, so that we notice that we're holding our breath a lot, or our breath is very shallow. It might be just up in the chest. So we can notice all of those things. And as we're focusing in on relaxing the body, which generally tends to happen as soon as we notice our body, we kind of come in and settle in and notice what's happening in our body. Then, if there's any real tight spots, they generally start to soften. And the same with the breath. When we notice that we could open up the breath a little bit more, that we could breathe a bit more deeply, that really signals our system that we're safe enough. We're safe enough to breathe. And sometimes it feels a bit too much to breathe deeply, and that's fine. You just see if there's a little bit more space there, a bit more space to breathe. It's nice to focus on the exhale because that doesn't involve kind of opening ourselves up. It kind of involves settling back, noticing how the stomach softens, the belly moves back towards the spine as we breathe out. And just this, we're watching the body and the breath, and watching kind of indicates there's a function of observing. Somebody's watching. There's a higher level of the mind that notices what's happening in the body and the breath. And we also notice what's happening in our thought stream. So let's watch our thoughts for a moment just to see what's coming up. We're talking about the primitive survival system, the mechanism of freeze, of getting away from anything that's uncomfortable. Now we can notice our thoughts about that. And one thing that some of us, I'm sure, noticed is that our mind wandered off. We started thinking about something else. And partly that's due to kind of the condition of the mind on a regular basis. Mind is very interesting in that we have these habits of letting our mind wander. Letting isn't even the right word. Our minds wander. And when we do practices like relaxing our body or focusing on the breath or watching the mind, over time, the mind becomes more highly trained. So we have more capacity to stay present. But we also start to empty out the trauma bucket. It's one way to put it. so that things that are causing us this fight, flight, freeze reaction are starting to become less alarming. So we're starting to really open up into being able to be present with what it is that's happening. And we don't need to escape from it because it's not threatening anymore, or it's not as threatening. And one of the ways we could think about that is the difference between how we react to things on a good day when we're feeling strong and stable and well rested and grounded, and when we're not having such an experience of strength. So if you're tired, you've been in a noisy environment, maybe you've been in a family environment like what is happening for many people around holidays, or you've just experienced some kind of grief, or we're being very affected by the environment around us, all of those things limit our capacity. And some days we just don't feel very steady. And we all can remember that we feel very differently. We react differently. Our capacity for being with difficult things is much different when we're feeling steady than when we're feeling kind of shaky. And for a moment, it might be helpful just to recognize that, to see if there's a kindness and understanding for yourself around that our capacity changes. We're not always strong and steady. Sometimes we're more reactive, kind of shaky. What does that feel like in your body to let that in, to let yourself have this variety of experience? And then come back to your body and your breath. Let's let thoughts go into the background for a minute again. Notice what's happening in your body right now as you're coming back and really noticing that, letting thoughts be in the background. Is there a level of tension? Has that changed? There might be sensation or energy somewhere in the body. Looking at the residual effects of what was happening before we got here, as well as the words and the inquiry that we're doing right now. Sometimes I'm not as steady and resilient as other times. And what does that feel like in the body? In a moment, we're going to bring up something to look at. And remember, as you're looking at images or bringing forward a memory, that tapping and tracing are really good tools. You could also do box breathing. You could open your eyes and just stop doing what we're doing. We've got a lot of different options. So we're going to look at a memory that's somewhat triggering, but not a 10 out of 10. Maybe it was being ignored at a party, or having a phone call to somebody but they haven't called us back, or just something that makes us feel a little uncomfortable. And then bring that in as a mindfulness inquiry, meaning stay aware of your body and your breath and notice the thoughts. Thoughts come in as words and as pictures. Might be a little video clip, there might be the sound of somebody's words in their voice. So stay very connected with your body and your breath as you're looking at this memory, this image of something that's coming up. When you're bringing forward something that you feel uncomfortable about or that you would want to defend yourself from in some way. And notice how you're reacting in your body. There's usually some kind of a response. And one of the responses is that we go into freeze. So suddenly you might notice that you're not really feeling much of anything. You might suddenly get sleepy and kind of doze off a bit. You might go into a fight response, get angry, think of some words to say. So we're really just watching to see what's your response right now. We're looking directly at our defense mechanism. And stay in touch with your body, with your breath. You could bring it up again or let something else come up. What does your system do when you need to defend yourself against something? Some social threat or emotional threat. And sometimes, if we're being shamed, we might notice we've gone into the shame posture. We're kind of hunched over or we're not breathing very much. So you could do the opposite. Open your shoulders, take a few deep breaths, and just experiment to see if that's suitable right now. And notice your surroundings. Notice if you're safe. One of the ways that our system works is that it goes on past evidence. And a lot of our past evidence is from childhood. We have a lot more capability to handle risk as an adult than we did as a child. But our system might still be reacting from kind of that child's perspective. And certainly, it's better to be safe than sorry. That's kind of the motto of our nervous system. Sometimes our whole field of awareness might go kind of blank. We realize that we're not in touch with our body anymore. Often we find that we're holding our breath, and then we could take a breath, just kind of open that up again. And notice what it is that you're protecting yourself from feeling. Sometimes that's open to us. We can notice that there's this defense mechanism, but there's also an opportunity to really tune in to what it is that we're protecting ourselves from. And do we need to do that? just in this moment, not in any other moment, but in this moment. And we could notice sensation or energy in the body and notice the qualities of that, if it's hot or cold, moving or still. We could notice the space all around the sensation. We're just looking to see how is it that our system protects us? What are the mechanics of that? So we're triggering ourselves a little bit by bringing up a memory of something that's a bit uncomfortable so that we can see how that mechanism works. And notice your breath and your body. Stay really in touch with your body and breath so that you notice if suddenly you're out of touch. And you might have gotten out of touch because you're off in a train of thought, distracting ourselves with catastrophic thinking or planning for our safety is very common. And it's pretty effective in terms of not feeling what's happening right now. And then let go of the inquiry. Just come back into noticing your body and breath. And notice if there's something that you wanted to carry forward. There might have been something that came up, or maybe there's an interest in monitoring this during the day. If you notice that there's a certain thought pattern that comes up, you might get very critical of yourself, for instance. It's another defense mechanism. You might go into some kind of angry thoughts, or you might suddenly find that you're daydreaming or you've dissociated. All of these are really good to track, to notice what's happening. In part because then we can feel what there is that we're trying to protect ourselves from feeling. And we can assess if this is actually still a good response, what might have really been necessary when we were 5 or 6 years old, or 14 or 15, whatever the ages were, might not be necessary anymore. We might actually have a lot more resilience than our primitive brain knows we have. A mindfulness practice around this can be very helpful and very revealing. What is actually the case now is very different than it was when we were children. And then let your shoulders relax, take a couple of deeper breaths. And when you're ready, open your eyes.